If you walk into that room tomorrow, Selena, don't come back here as my wife. That was the sentence my husband gave me the night before my doctoral defense. Not good luck. Not I'm proud of you. Not after 8 years of work. You are finally here. Just a threat, spoken in our 24/7 p.m., while my printed dissertation sat on the dining table in 3 clean stacks. My presentation was saved on 2 flash drives, and my navy blazer hung on the back of a chair like it was waiting for a woman braver than me to wear it. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. Hunter stood by the sink with his arms crossed. His mother, Barbara, sat at the breakfast table in her church cardigan, drinking tea, as if she had not just helped turn my home into a courtroom. The overhead light made everything too bright: the white tiles, the silver faucet, the little pile of sharpened pencils beside my notes. Even my own hands looked pale and unfamiliar. I had spent almost a decade studying women's labor in American universities. I had written about invisible work, stolen credit, closed doors, and the polite language used to keep smart women small. I thought I understood the history. Then the history walked into my kitchen wearing my husband's face. "Say that again," I whispered. Hunter's jaw tightened. "You heard me?" Barbara set down her teacup with a soft click. "A married woman does not need a doctorate. She needs humility." I looked at her, then at him. "My defense is at 9 tomorrow morning." "No," Barbara said. "Your embarrassment is at 9 tomorrow morning." I almost laughed, because the sentence was so ugly it sounded rehearsed. Barbara had arrived from Ohio 2 days earlier without being invited, carrying a suitcase, a tin of stale cookies, and enough opinions to poison every room. From the minute she stepped inside, she had stared at my bookshelves like they were evidence of a crime. "A wife's true degree is a peaceful home," she had said. "Women who chase titles lose their softness," she had said. "Hunter needs a wife, not a rival," she had said. I had ignored her because my defense was close and I needed my energy. I told myself that after tomorrow, after the committee signed the forms, after someone finally called me Dr. Herrera, I could decide what to do about my marriage. But Hunter had decided first. "You promised me you supported this," I said. My voice sounded thin, but it did not break. "You came to my first conference. You took pictures when my article was accepted. You told people you were proud of me." "I was proud when it was a hobby," he snapped. "Not when it became your whole personality." My stomach turned cold. A hobby. 8 years of unpaid teaching, archival trips, assistantships, panic attacks, revisions, late-night feedback, rejected chapters, and waking up before sunrise to write before the world could ask anything else of me. A hobby. I stepped toward the dining table. "I am going to bed. Tomorrow I am going to defend my dissertation. We can talk after." Hunter moved faster than I expected. His hand closed around my upper arm. At first, I thought he was just stopping me. Then his fingers tightened hard enough to hurt. "Let go," I said. "You are not walking away from me." "Hunter, let go of my arm." Barbara rose from the chair. There are moments when the body understands danger before the mind is ready to name it. The room became too sharp. I noticed the black handle of the kitchen scissors in Barbara's hand. I noticed Hunter's thumb pressing into the bruise he had not yet made. I noticed the smell of mint tea and dish soap. I noticed my dissertation, neat and helpless on the table. "What are you doing?" I asked. Barbara came behind me. "Helping you remember your place." The first cut sounded small. That was the worst part. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a dry metallic snip near my ear, followed by the soft fall of hair against the tile. For 1 second, I could not breathe. Then I screamed. Hunter held me tighter. I twisted, kicked, tried to pull away, but he pinned my arms while his mother cut into my hair like she was trimming a hedge. Long strands slid down my blazer sleeve. Another chunk fell across my cheek. I heard myself begging, then cursing, then making a sound I did not recognize. "Stop!" I cried. "Please stop!" Barbara's voice was calm near my ear. "No serious committee will respect a woman who looks unstable." A snip. "You can stay home tomorrow." A snip. "You can apologize." A snip. "You can learn that family comes before ambition." Something inside me split, but it was not surrender. It was a door. When Hunter finally released me, I hit the floor on my knees. Hair clung to my damp face. My scalp burned where Barbara had pulled too hard. My arms ached. I crawled to the bathroom while they argued behind me, not with guilt, not with horror, but with irritation that I had made such noise. I locked the bathroom door and leaned my back against it. For a long time, I did not look in the mirror. I sat on the cold floor, shaking, with both hands pressed over my mouth so they would not hear me cry. My phone was in my pocket. My dissertation was outside. My life, or what I had mistaken for my life, was on the other side of a locked door. Then I stood. The mirror showed a woman with red eyes, jagged hair, one side nearly hacked to the scalp, and a face so pale she looked like she had walked out of a crime scene. I stared at her, and after a few seconds, I stopped seeing what they had done to me. I started seeing what they had failed to do. I was still alive. I was still standing, and my defense was still at 9. I opened my phone with trembling fingers and ordered a rideshare. Then I sent one text to my advisor, Dr. Rebecca Tran. "I am safe, but something happened. I will explain tomorrow. Please do not cancel my defense." I waited 3 seconds, then added, "No matter what anyone says, I am coming." I shoved my dissertation, notes laptop, flash drives, passport, and a clean blouse into a backpack. When I unlocked the bathroom door, Hunter was in the hallway. His face changed when he saw the bag. Selena, don't be dramatic. That sentence almost made me laugh. Dramatic was cutting your wife's hair the night before her doctoral defense, because you were afraid of her name becoming larger than yours. I walked past him. Barbara called from the kitchen, "You will regret humiliating this family." I stopped at the door and turned around. For the first time that night, my voice came out steady. "No," I said. "You will." Then I left. The motel smelled like bleach, old carpet, and someone else's cigarettes. It was the only place near campus with a room available after midnight. The man at the front desk barely looked at me until I asked if he had scissors. Then his eyes lifted to my hair, and pity passed across his face so quickly he tried to hide it. He handed me a small sewing kit instead. "I'm sorry," he said. Those two words nearly broke me. Not because they fixed anything, but because they were the first kind words I had heard all night. In the motel bathroom, under a buzzing yellow light, I cut what I could. There was no way to make it pretty. I trimmed the worst uneven pieces, washed the hair from my neck, and wrapped a towel around my head. At 3:18 a.m., I sat on the edge of the bed with my dissertation open in my lap and tried to review my opening remarks. The words blurred. I kept hearing the scissors. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt Hunter's hands on my arms and Barbara's breath near my ear. At 5:40, I gave up pretending to sleep. I showered, put on my white blouse, navy blazer, and black slacks, and looked at myself in the mirror again. I did not look polished, but I also looked awake. On the way to campus, my phone vibrated so many times that the driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Hunter, come home. We can still fix this. Hunter, Mom is upset too? You scared her. Hunter, if you go in there looking like that, they will think you're unstable. Hunter, I'm warning you because I love you." I turned off the phone. Love does not hold you still while someone cuts pieces of you away. The morning was cold and bright. Madison had that early spring chill that makes every breath feel like glass. Students crossed the campus with coffee cups, backpacks, earbuds, and ordinary worries. They did not know that I was walking through the last few yards of my old life. Near the humanities building, I ducked into a restroom. I removed the towel from my head and tried to smooth the damage. A young woman washing her hands looked at me, froze, and then softened. "Professor Herrera?" she asked. I recognized her after a second. Maya Patel, a master's student from a seminar I had assisted the previous year. She had almost dropped out after a senior professor mocked her accent during a presentation. I had found her crying in the stairwell and told her that institutions survive by making talented people think they are accidents. She remembered me. I wished she had not seen me like this. "Maya," I said. "Good morning." Her eyes moved to my hair, then back to my face. She did not ask the cruel question. She did not demand the story. Instead, she pulled a wine-colored scarf from her bag. "Please," she said. "Take it." "I can't." "You can? You told me once that asking for help is not the same as giving up." That was when I almost cried. She helped me tie the scarf so it covered the worst of the cuts. It did not hide everything. Nothing could. But it made me feel less exposed, less like my pain was the first thing entering the room before I did. "Thank you," I whispered. Maya smiled, but her eyes shone. "Go become Dr. Herrera." I walked to the department with those words beating in my chest. Dr. Rebecca Tran was waiting outside the small auditorium, holding a paper cup of coffee she had not touched. She had been my advisor for 6 years, which meant she had seen me exhausted, stubborn, brilliant, wrong, defensive, and occasionally impossible. She knew how to be gentle, but she also knew when gentleness was not enough. The second she saw me, her face changed. "Selena," she said. "What happened?" I tried to answer professionally. I truly did. I tried to say there was an incident at home, that I was safe, that I wanted to proceed. But the words collapsed. "My husband and his mother tried to stop me," I said. "They cut my hair." Rebecca closed her eyes once. When she opened them, the woman standing in front of me was no longer only my advisor. She was a witness. "We can postpone," she said quietly. "No committee would hold this against you. No one has the right to demand performance from you after violence." "I know." I looked at the auditorium doors. "If I don't do this today, every hour I spent earning this degree becomes something they can claim they interrupted." Rebecca's mouth tightened. "You do not have to prove your strength by bleeding in public." "I'm not proving strength," I said. "I'm taking back the room." She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then we do it your way. But after the defense, we document everything. We contact campus security. We file a police report. We get you somewhere safe." The word "we" nearly knocked the air out of me. For years, I had believed success meant needing no one. That morning, I learned that survival often begins when someone stands beside you and says "we." At 8:55, the committee entered. Dr. Dominic Hale was first, carrying a folder full of notes and wearing the expression of a man who considered kindness an inefficient use of time. Dr. Samira Qureshi followed, sharp-eyed and unreadable. 2 other faculty members took their seats. Then a small group of graduate students and colleagues slipped into the back. I kept my eyes on the podium. Then I saw him, my father. Carson Herrera stood in the front row in a dark gray suit, older than I remembered, his hands folded in front of him. We had not spoken in almost 3 years. Our last conversation had been a fight so bitter I could still taste it. He had said Hunter did not respect my mind. I had accused him of only respecting me when I made him proud in ways he could brag about. We had both said things that were partly true and fully cruel. And yet there he was. Before I could decide whether to be angry, he stood. Not dramatically. He simply rose to his feet. Dr. Tran stood beside him. Then Maya stood in the back. Then the graduate students. Then the faculty. One by one, the room stood for me. I gripped the podium so hard my knuckles hurt. They were not standing because I looked pitiful. Most of them did not know what had happened. They stood because they knew what it took to arrive at that room after years of being questioned, corrected, underestimated, and required to be excellent just to be considered acceptable. The first 30 seconds of my presentation were rough. My voice shook. My throat was dry. The scarf itched against my skin. Then I clicked to the first slide. The title appeared behind me in visible labor. Visible Power: Women's Administrative Work and Academic Authority in 20th Century American Universities. And suddenly, I remembered who I was. I had defended my work 1,000 times in my head. In grocery lines. In shower steam, on buses. While cooking dinner, Hunter refused to eat because I had seasoned it, like a cafeteria. While grading student papers at midnight. While sitting in archives with white cotton gloves and a pencil. Reading letters written by women who had done the work of departments while men collected the titles. Those women came with me into the room. I spoke about records no one had bothered to read, about secretaries who shaped policy, research assistants whose names disappeared from publications, wives who typed manuscripts and hosted visiting scholars, while being told they were not intellectual partners. I spoke about institutions that claim neutrality while quietly asking women the emotional weight of everyone else's ambition. With every slide, my fear moved farther away. Dr. Hale interrupted first. Your argument depends on interpreting informal influence as institutional power. How do you avoid overstating your evidence? A year earlier, that question might have shaken me. That morning, it landed like a challenge I had been born ready to answer. I avoid it by refusing to treat informality as insignificance. I said. The archive repeatedly shows women shaping decisions without being named as decision makers. The absence of title is not evidence of absence. It is often evidence of exclusion, someone in the back murmured. Dr. Qureshi leaned forward. Then tell us why this matters now. I looked at her. I looked at the room. I felt the scarf around my head and the raw skin beneath it. It matters because institutions still benefit from women's work while questioning women's authority, I said. They praise sacrifice, then punish ambition. They invite women into rooms, then ask them to be grateful for the chair instead of asking why they were kept out for so long. For my voice did not shake that time. For 90 minutes, they questioned me. Methodology, scope, counterarguments, archival gaps, theoretical framework, future research. I answered everything, admitted what I could not. I defended the work without pretending it was perfect. I listened. I clarified. I pushed back when I needed to. By the end, the fear had changed into something cleaner. Rage, maybe. Or freedom. The committee asked me to step outside while they deliberated. The hallway felt colder than the room. My hands began to tremble the second I was no longer speaking. Rebecca hugged me hard. You were extraordinary, she whispered. I wanted to believe her, but my body was still waiting for danger. Then my father approached. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked at the scarf. His eyes darkened. Hunter called me last night. My chest tightened. Of course he did. He told me you were unstable. He said you had been acting erratically, that you might embarrass yourself, that I should stay away because my presence would make it worse. I stared at him. Knew. The answer came quickly. Too quickly for pride, too painfully for performance. Why not? I asked. Because he sounded like a man building an alibi before anyone had accused him. My throat closed. Carson looked down the hall toward the elevator. Then Barbara called me. Crying. Saying you had lost control. Saying women in academia become arrogant and cruel. Saying Hunter was heartbroken. That sounds like her. I drove to your apartment. I went still. The doorman said he saw you leave after midnight with a backpack. Crying. He said Hunter came down 10 minutes later asking if he had seen which car you got into. I wrapped my arms around myself. I found the motel. He continued. The receptionist would not give me your room number, which was correct, but he did tell me you were safe. He also said you had asked for scissors. A tear slipped down before I could stop it. My father's face twisted with regret. I should have protected you sooner. Less, I said. There was no softness in the word. I did not offer forgiveness because he had finally shown up. I did not pretend the last 3 years had vanished because he looked sorry. He nodded. Yes, that was all. And somehow, it was the first honest conversation we had had in years. The auditorium door opened. Dr. Hale stepped into the hall. Ms. Herrera, we are ready. I walked back in with Rebecca on one side and my father on the other. My legs felt weak, but I did not sit until I reached the chair facing the committee. The room had become silent in the heavyway rooms due before verdicts, weddings, funerals, and sentences. Dr. Hale adjusted his glasses. Selena Maria Herrera, he said, the committee is pleased to inform you that you have successfully defended an outstanding doctoral dissertation. The room disappeared. He kept speaking, but I heard only pieces. Unanimous approval. Honorable distinction. Nomination for the Faculty Research Prize. Congratulations, Dr. Herrera. Doctor, the word moved through me like light through a closed house. Applause began softly, then grew until it filled every corner of the auditorium. Maya was crying. Rebecca had both hands over her mouth. My father bowed his head. I stood because I did not know what else to do, and Dr. Qureshi shook my hand with a rare smile. Do not stop writing, she said. I won't, I replied, and I meant it. Then the side door opened. Hunter walked in. He was dressed in the charcoal suit he wore to weddings and funerals, his hair combed carefully, his face arranged into concern. For a second, I saw the man I had married charming, practiced, good at entering rooms as if he belonged at the center of them. But this room was not his. He looked from the committee to the students, from Rebecca to my father, then to me. His eyes caught on the applause, the certificate folder, the way people stood around me instead of away from me. He realized he had arrived too late. Selena, he said. My father stepped between us. Do not come near her. Hunter's expression flickered. Carson, with respect, this is between my wife and me. No, my father said. It is between you and the consequences. The auditorium went quiet. Hunter tried to smile at me around my father's shoulder. Selena, please. I came because I was worried. I walked forward. Every step felt like crossing that was burning behind me. You were worried? I asked. Yes. You left in the middle of the night. You wouldn't answer your phone. My mother was terrified. Your mother cut my hair while you held me still. The sentence landed in the room with a force that seemed to remove all oxygen. Dr. Tran turned sharply toward campus security near the door. I had not even noticed she had called them. Hunter's mouth opened. Then Clozo is not fair, he said weakly. You're making it sound accurate? I said. His face reddened. You were hysterical. No, I was trapped. You were going to destroy our marriage over a title. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and felt the final thread snap. No, Hunter. You destroyed our marriage because you were more comfortable with my obedience than my success. He glanced around, searching for sympathy and finding none. That was the beginning of his punishment. Not prison yet. Not divorce yet. Not the police report yet. Just the public discovery that his version of the story no longer controlled the room. Justice did not arrive like thunder. It arrived as paperwork. It arrived in photographs Rebecca took of my hair and bruised arms in a private office, while I stood under fluorescent lights and tried not to shake. It arrived in the campus police officer writing down my statement. It arrived in the doorman's security footage, the motel receipt, Hunter's text messages, Barbara's voicemail telling me I had forced a mother to take desperate action, and the testimony of a front desk clerk who remembered a woman with ruined hair asking for scissors at 3 a.m. It arrived in my father calling his attorney before I could ask him to. It arrived in me saying, clearly and without apology, I want to file charges. A Hunter kept trying to reach me for the next 48 hours. First came love. Then blame. Then fear. I miss my wife. You know Mom didn't mean it. You are ruining my career. We can say it was a misunderstanding. Please don't make this public. By then, public was exactly where the truth belonged. Barbara's church friends heard first, though not from me. She had told too many people her proud version before she understood evidence had a way of surviving arrogance. Hunter had told his boss he needed personal leave because his wife was having breakdown. Then the police report became impossible to explain. The university issued a no-contact notice because he had entered my defense or being told not to interfere. His carefully built image cracked so fast I almost felt dizzy watching it. Almost. I moved into Rebecca's guest room for 1 week, then into a small apartment near campus with tall windows, uneven floors, and no one else's key. Maya and 2 other students brought me a plant, a bag of groceries, and a terrible store-bought cake with Dr. Har written in blue icing. I cried harder over that cake than I had over the divorce papers. My hair began to grow back in uneven little waves. For a while, I wore scarves every day. Not because I was ashamed, but because I liked choosing the color of my own covering. Wine red for meetings. Gold for the day I gave my first lecture after the defense. The lecture hall was full. Not because of gossip, though I knew gossip helped fill seats. Students came because word had traveled that Downton Herrera had defended a dissertation after the worst night of her life, and had still answered Dr. Hale without flinching. I walked to the podium and looked at all of them. Some were young women sitting too straight, trying to appear confident. Some were first-generation students who carried entire families in their backpacks. Some were men who needed to hear this too. Because patriarchy does not only damage women, it teaches men to confuse love with control and authority with fear. My first lecture as Dr. Herrera, I began, is about labor no one wants to name until someone refuses to do it silently. No one moved. I told them about the women in the archive. Not about Hunter. Not directly. I did not need to make my bruises the lesson. My scholarship was enough. But at the end, I said this. Whenever an institution, a family, or a partner tells you that your ambition makes you difficult, ask who benefits from your silence. A student in the second row started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room. That sound did not erase what happened in my kitchen. Nothing erases violence. But it gave the memory a new ending. The legal process was slower than any revenge fantasy. There were statements, delays, and days when I felt punished for telling the truth. Hunter's attorney tried to frame it as a domestic argument. Barbara claimed she had only intended to fix My hair because I was not in my right mind. Then the evidence spoke. The bruises matched my statement. The messages showed coercion. The voicemail showed intent. The doorman confirmed my condition. And when Hunter was asked why he had not called emergency services, if he truly believed I was unstable, he had no answer that did not reveal the lie. The charges did not solve everything, but they did something important. They made the truth official. The divorce moved faster. Hunter wanted quiet terms. I wanted clean terms. I kept my retirement account, my research funds, my books, my name, and every award I had earned, while he complained that I had become vindictive. That was what he called a woman who stopped absorbing damage politely. My father and I did not become perfect. This is not that kind of story. He still struggled with apology. I still struggled with trust. Some weeks we spoke twice. Some weeks we did not speak at all. But when he came to my award ceremony 3 months later, he sat in the front row again. Afterward, he handed me a small box. Inside was a fountain pen, black with a silver clip. I should have given you something like this when you started, he said. I held the pen carefully. You're giving it now. He nodded. For whatever you write next. That was the closest we came to forgiveness that day. It was enough to begin. A year later, I stood in another university auditorium, this time as an invited speaker. My hair had grown into a short, deliberate style that made me look, as Maya put it, like someone who grades mercy but argues with footnotes. I wore the navy blazer from the defense, because I wanted to remember that clothes can carry history without carrying shame. After my talk, a young woman waited until the line was gone. My family says women don't belong in graduate school, she said. They say I'll become impossible to marry. I looked at her, and for one strange second, I saw myself in the motel mirror. Then I smiled. Maybe, I said. You are not here to become easy to own. She laughed through tears. I gave her my card. On the flight home, I opened my notebook and wrote the first page of a new book. Not an article. Not a chapter for someone else's collection. A book with my name on the cover. The first sentence was simple. They tried to make my silence look like love. I paused, then wrote the second. I chose my voice instead. Sometimes people ask whether showing up to that defense was revenge. I tell them the revenge was not the applause, or the degree, or Hunter's face when the room believed me instead of him. Revenge was not the divorce papers, the police report, or Barbara discovering that respectability cannot survive evidence. Those were consequences. My revenge was quieter. It was waking up in my own apartment and hearing nothing but the kettle boiling. It was writing my name as Dr. Selena Herrera and feeling no need to shrink the letters. It was teaching women to recognize the difference between love and control. It was becoming a person no one in that kitchen had permission to define. On the morning my final divorce decree arrived, I stood by the window with coffee in hand and the document in the other. Outside, students hurried across the sidewalk under a gray Wisconsin sky. The world looked ordinary, which felt miraculous. I touched the short hair near my temple, the place where Barbara's scissors had gone deepest. There was no scar anyone else could see. But I knew where the wound had been. I also knew what had grown from it. They said women did not belong in academia. They said a wife should know her place. They said my ambition would cost me everything. They were wrong. I did not lose everything. I lost the people who needed me small. And when I walked across that stage, when they called me doctor, when my students rose to their feet years later and repeated my words back to me, I finally understood the truth that saved my life. No one can lock you out of a room that was built from your own courage.